Dear chosen ones, they didn't realize that picking a fight with you was like punching a flame. Now they're burning in a fire. They started with their own hands. They thought they were clever, subtle, untouchable. They tried to mark you as the villain, to manipulate the narrative and walk away clean. But energy doesn't lie. The same hands that built lies are now catching heat. The same mouths that spread gossip are now quiet with consequence. And the very drama they ignited for attention is now the thing unraveling their peace. What they thought was a game has become their greatest regret. And deep down, they know they came for someone protected by forces they never understood. Before we go any further, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has donated through Super Thanks. Your support means more than words can express. Whether you've given once, give often, or simply show up and listen, I am deeply grateful for your presence, your energy, your comments, your time. It all matters here. And if you feel led to give, thank you in advance. But if you don't, know this: you are still seen, still valued, and still a vital part of this space. Now, if you believe this message is speaking directly to you, if something in your spirit just said, "This is for me," go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and comment 777 down below. When you engage, you're not just supporting the message, you're helping it find others like you. You're helping awaken more chosen ones who need to remember their own power. This isn't just content, it's a call to alignment. Let's keep this frequency circulating, because this isn't just another message, it's a reckoning. Making an enemy out of you, chosen one, will go down as one of the most devastating miscalculations of their life. You weren't fragile, you weren't naive, you weren't some soft target for their unresolved ego to feed on. You were the test, and they failed. The universe gave them a chance to honor you, and instead they chose to mock what they didn't understand. They gambled their peace to win an illusion. And now they're paying for it in silence, anxiety, and spiritual collapse. Let's not pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Let's stop acting like you haven't felt the shift. They're unraveling. The same people who laughed when you cried are now losing their grip on the same peace they took for granted. The ones who cheered your breakdown are now waking up to chaos that has no name, no explanation, because it's not random. It's not punishment. It's correction. The universe doesn't forget when you come for someone chosen. And now it's your turn to stop forgetting. You forgot who you were. You made yourself small so they'd feel big. You tried to make peace with people who waged spiritual war behind your back. You questioned your own discernment because you didn't want to believe what your soul already knew. You tried to rationalize sabotage, call envy misunderstanding, and shrink your glow just to make them comfortable. But deep down, you felt it. You felt that tension, that unease, that cosmic pull telling you, this isn't just life, this is something deeper. And you were right. You've been doubting a power that even your enemies recognized before you did. They saw your light before you saw it in yourself. That's why they tried so hard to dim it. That's why they made you the target. Not because you were weak, but because they feared what you might become if you ever remembered the truth. You were never alone. You were never unprotected. You were never regular. You were chosen. And when someone tries to destroy what the universe is protecting, that energy always circles back. The attacks they aimed at you are now circling their own lives. Not because you cursed them, not because you retaliated, but because truth always defends itself. So if you're still wondering whether you're imagining this shift, you're not. If you're still wondering whether this is karma, it is. If you're still wondering whether your pain meant something, it did. Because this isn't just aftermath, it's divine backlash. It's the spiritual receipts being delivered in full. And now it's time to break it down, step by step, layer by layer. Because this isn't just a message for your mind, It's one your spirit is going to feel. This isn't just something to hear, it's something to remember. Because if they really did come for you, if they truly underestimated you, this is about to hit deep. This isn't just a story, it's prophecy fulfilled. Let's get started. God's chosen ones, making you the enemy, was their biggest mistake. Karma is wreaking havoc. Now. Number 1. They didn't make an enemy. They made a monument to their own failure. Chosen one, let's be clear. When they came after you, they weren't building a battlefield. They were building a memorial. Not for your destruction, but for their downfall. They didn't create a threat when they targeted you. They created a warning label for their own destiny. And now, every day they wake up, they're forced to walk past the rubble of what used to be their control. They have to look at the crumbling walls of their pride and whisper to themselves, I did this. With my own hands, I built the very thing that's haunting me. Tell me, how does it feel to be the one thing they underestimated but can't escape? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why did they pick you in the first place? Was it because you were weak, or because they could sense your quiet strength? They saw your gentleness and assumed it was permission. They mistook your humility for fragility. They thought they were silencing a lamb, but they ended up provoking a lion. What they didn't realize was that your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And when they came to crush you, they accidentally triggered a spiritual alarm that set forces into motion they could never comprehend. Look at the stories of David and Goliath, 1 Samuel 17:45-47. Goliath underestimated David's size, but what he couldn't measure was the anointing on David's life. The same applies to you. They came swinging, but you came chosen. And now, just like Goliath, they're learning that when someone attacks what God has appointed, they're not just fighting flesh, they're fighting divine will. They didn't just stir drama, they activated karma, and this wasn't one of those misunderstandings that can be swept under a rug. No, this was deliberate. They plotted, lied, manipulated, and gossiped, weaponizing your name for entertainment. But what happens when the joke starts echoing back? What happens when the lie they laughed at becomes the glitch in their own system? Suddenly, everything they touch turns to dust. Doors that once opened with ease are sealed shut. Resources vanish, relationships break down, peace escapes them. And every single misfortune they experience now has your energy wrapped in the cause. Why? Because energy doesn't lie, and God does not sleep. As Galatians 6:7 reminds us, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. So now they're reaping the whirlwind they once sent your way, and it's too late to rewrite the harvest. They tried to play God in your life, and now the real God is showing up to settle the score. But chosen one, don't deny that you felt it coming. You knew it before you had the words. That heaviness in your chest, that fire in your belly every time they smiled in your face but stabbed you behind your back. You weren't paranoid. You were prophetic. Your spirit knew before your mind caught up. You were built to detect the unseen. You were chosen to feel what others pretend isn't there. Your discernment has always been your defense. Just like Harriet Tubman, who navigated darkness with nothing but instinct and divine direction, you sensed the trap long before it was visible. Tubman didn't need maps. She had intuition forged by heaven. And neither do you. When God has his hand on you, the enemy's plan becomes your classroom, not your cage. They made you the villain in their story because they couldn't handle the truth of who you were. Why? Because if you were innocent, then they were guilty, and facing that was too painful. So they projected, they lied, they created fiction to protect their fragile self-image. But here's the thing they forgot. Truth doesn't need defending, it defends itself. Eventually all the noise fades. And what's left standing isn't the loudest voice, but the most aligned soul. Ecclesiastes 3:17 says, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. The time has come, and they're being judged not by you, but by the imbalance they created. What they tried to bury has become the very thing resurrecting your name. You weren't just another person. You were a soul on divine assignment. And when someone tries to assassinate God's assignment, they don't win. They unravel. Look at Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for years for standing on truth, only to rise and become a global symbol of freedom. When God is for you, confinement becomes preparation. Persecution becomes purification. They set the trap confidently, thinking you'd fall first. But they forgot earthquakes don't discriminate. When the ground shakes, everyone tumbles. The only difference? You were built for it. You were made to rise through rubble. They were not. You are the phoenix they tried to burn, only to realize fire is your element. You're not just surviving, you're shape-shifting, you're being forged. Chosen one, have you ever noticed how the enemy seems confused when you don't fall apart, as if your piece was supposed to crumble? That's because they don't understand spiritual architecture. They don't realize your roots are planted in something deeper. Romans 8:31 declares, if God is for us, who can be against us? The answer is no one that wins. Not long term. Think about Malala Yousafzai, shot in the head for standing up for education, only to become the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner. Why? Because some souls are untouchable, not because life doesn't try, but because purpose preserves them. Every betrayal made you sharper. Every rejection was really redirection. Every season of isolation trained your endurance. And you started believing their lies for a moment, didn't you? You asked, why me? What did I do? But the pain wasn't punishment. It was preparation. The rejection wasn't personal. It was protection. Because not everyone can breathe in the altitude God is taking you to. You forgot you were gold, refined by fire. But the universe remembered, and now it's calling you out of hiding, not just to survive the storm, but to command it. Even Oprah, before becoming a billionaire and icon, was told she was unfit for TV, but the rejection became her redirection. The obstacle became the open door. So ask yourself now, what version of you did your enemies accidentally activate? And why do you keep playing small just to make others comfortable? You don't need their applause. You were never meant for the crowd. You were chosen for clarity. You were marked by heaven. And now, the very ones who mocked you are watching everything collapse around them, not because of your revenge, but because of divine recognition. Isaiah 54:17 confirms it. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and those who rose against you, their plans are returning to sender with interest. So remember this, they didn't destroy you, they revealed you, and in doing so, they dismantled the illusion they needed to survive. The story has flipped. The monument stands, and it's not of your defeat, it's of their mistake. Number 2, you were their obsession. Now you're their collapse. Chosen one, they didn't just watch you, they studied you, obsessed over you, monitored your every move like their survival depended on it. And in a way, it did. You became their compass, even though they never admitted it. They laughed at you in public, but whispered about you in private. They acted indifferent, but couldn't go a day without checking in on your life, your progress, your energy. Why? Because your presence reminded them of everything they weren't. Your light exposed the darkness they worked so hard to conceal. And here's the twist. They weren't just watching, they were consuming, digesting every post, every rumor, every victory. But obsession has a cost. And when your life becomes someone else's main focus, especially with envy at the root, it always ends in collapse. The attention they gave you became the rope they unknowingly tied around their own stability. And now, as you rise, they're unraveling, not because of what you did, but because of what they refused to become. Have you ever asked yourself, why were they so obsessed with me when they claimed not to care? The truth is, they hated how you could rise from nothing, how you could walk through fire and come out purified. While you were healing your childhood wounds, they were gathering gossip. While you were rebuilding from scratch, they were building fake alliances just to tear you down. But tell me this, how can you destroy someone whose entire foundation is spiritual? Isaiah 60:1 says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." Your light wasn't just visible, it was disruptive. It made people squint because they weren't ready to see clearly. You weren't showing off. You were just shining. But for those still trapped in darkness, your shine was offensive. Let's look at the real world. Think of Kobe Bryant. He was mocked, criticized, even doubted early in his career. But while others partied, he practiced. While others talked, he trained. Eventually, his excellence silenced every critic. Just like you, chosen one, your discipline became louder than their distractions. They invested so much energy into hating you, mocking your growth, twisting your words, yet their own lives began to rot from the inside. Dreams turned to delays, progress turned to plateaus. Why? Because you cannot chase destiny and throw darts at someone else's purpose at the same time. They tried to feed off your fall, but forgot one thing. You weren't falling, you were transforming. Proverbs 26:27 warns us, "Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them." And now that's exactly what's happening. The trap they set for you has become their own undoing. The envy they nursed is now a poison eating their peace, because energy doesn't lie and heaven doesn't forget. They poured more into hating you than into healing themselves. They were more loyal to the narrative that made you the villain than to the truth that could have set them free. And now that you're succeeding without their help, without their validation, without even mentioning their name, they're collapsing under the weight of a false identity. Does that sound familiar to you? Chosen one, how many times did you question yourself? How many nights did you lie awake asking, what did I do to deserve this? Why am I always the target? It's because your authenticity shattered their illusion. Your honesty convicted their deception. You became the living proof that healing is possible, and that terrified them. Think of Princess Diana, loved by the public, despised by the palace. Why? Because she moved in truth, compassion, and authenticity, and that exposed the games behind the scenes. You carry that same disruptive frequency. You don't play by the rules of this world, and that's why the world tries to label you as a threat. They called you too sensitive, but now they can't handle the very pressure they once threw your way. They called you too much, but now they can't even manage their own emotions. You were mocked for your depth, but now they're drowning in the shallow waters they chose to stay in. Romans 12:19 reminds us, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." And chosen one, that repayment has begun, not through violence, but through vindication. Every step you took in silence was recorded. Every time you chose growth over gossip, heaven took note. They thought they could clone your spirit, mimic your style, copy your essence. But spiritual power can't be imitated. It has to be cultivated. They envied your healing, but didn't want to face their own trauma. They wanted your crown, but not your cross. And now, they're stuck in a loop of collapse, chasing shadows of a self they never had the courage to develop. Think of Michael B. Jordan, once bullied in school for being ambitious and focused. Now he's the one directing, acting, and walking red carpets, while his former critics scroll in silence. Like him, you're becoming the one they said you'd never be, and that contradiction is breaking them from the inside. So stop asking if you were overthinking. You weren't. Stop wondering if they're still watching. They are. Every elevation you step into is a spiritual earthquake to their false peace. Your growth didn't just surprise them, it sentenced them, because they built their confidence on the assumption that you'd never rise. And now that you are, their identity has nothing left to hold on to. Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." That's what's happening right now. God is setting your table in plain sight. They don't know whether to applaud or implode, because everything they said behind your back, it's boomeranging. The shadows they cursed you in, that darkness is now engulfing their own clarity. You didn't destroy them. Their obsession with your downfall did. They created a version of you in their mind that never existed, and now that you're succeeding outside of their narrative, they can't reconcile it. Your light is collapsing their illusion, not because you're trying, but because you exist. And what happens to people who need you to fail to feel fulfilled? They fall, they fade, they fracture under the very obsession they thought would bring them power. This isn't karma in theory, this is correction in real time. You were their obsession, now you're their consequence. And chosen one, the fall has only just begun. Number 3, they called you crazy. Now they can't sleep without checking if you've moved on. Chosen one, let's not sugarcoat it. They didn't just misunderstand you, they branded you. They labeled your pain as instability. They weaponized your emotion. The very reactions you had to being gaslit, manipulated, and emotionally ambushed were turned into headlines in their twisted narrative. They didn't just lie about you, they produced a version of you, one built to support the storyline where they were the calm, innocent savior, and you were the crazy, dramatic one who couldn't hold it together. But now, that script has expired, the stage is empty, and the only audience left is the one inside their own crumbling psyche. Have you ever noticed how the same people who once mocked your feelings now obsess over your silence? Why is your peace suddenly their panic? Why does your absence shake the room more than your presence ever did? Because chosen one, your quiet says what your voice no longer needs to. You were never unstable. You were surrounded by instability and still tried to walk in grace. You weren't erratic. You were exhausted from managing the emotional damage they inflicted while they smiled for the crowd. They called you crazy because they couldn't control you. They needed to discredit your reality so they could keep theirs intact. But the truth? You weren't losing your mind. You were losing your tolerance. There's a difference. And deep down, they knew that if you ever truly walked away, if you ever got quiet, they would lose the only thing they truly had control over, your reaction. Jeremiah 20:11 says, "But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior, so my persecutors will stumble and not prevail. They will fail and be thoroughly disgraced. Their dishonor will never be forgotten." You weren't being dramatic, you were being delivered. And now that you're gone, the silence they once mocked is the very thunder that keeps them awake at night. Look at Britney Spears, branded crazy by the media, silenced through a conservatorship, and ridiculed by the same public who watched her collapse. But behind the scenes, she was being controlled, manipulated, and isolated. And still, she rose. Still, her story came to light, just like yours will. Because the truth always resurfaces, not always in headlines, but in the unmistakable collapse of lies that cannot sustain themselves. They gaslit you into silence. They poked until you broke, and when you flinched, they pointed and said, "See? Look how unstable they are." But now that you've gone silent, now that you've cut off the supply of explanation and reaction, their entire illusion is falling apart. because the story they wrote depended on your emotional visibility, and you stopped giving them that. You've disappeared from the stage, and now they're frantically trying to find someone else to cast. But the audience is leaving, the script has holes, and even their closest allies are starting to wonder, was it ever really them? Or have we been fooled? You were never crazy, you were intuitive, you were never erratic, you were prophetic. The panic you felt wasn't a sign of instability, it was your soul sounding the alarm. And now, chosen one, that same alarm is ringing in their ears. Only this time, it's not warning of your collapse, it's announcing theirs. Have you wondered why they still watch you? Why their fake accounts view your stories? Why every post you make sends subtle tremors through their circles? Because they're terrified of your evolution. They don't fear your failure, they've already rehearsed that version. What they fear is the fact that you're growing, rising, healing without them. The version of you that they told everyone was too emotional, too broken, too much, is now thriving. And that contradiction is breaking them from the inside out. Proverbs 12:19 says, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment." They built their identity on a version of you that was never real. And now, as your real self begins to shine, their fake storyline is rotting from the roots. Think of Meghan Markle, called manipulative, dramatic, and even labeled a threat to royal tradition. But behind the media smear campaign was a woman protecting her peace, her child, and her truth. She didn't crumble under their narrative, she stepped away from it. And the world watched as the so-called problem actually became the proof of just how broken the system was. And let's not pretend it was easy for you. Let's not ignore how you lay awake some nights, wondering, what if they were right? What if I was the problem? They had you doubting your own spirit. You questioned your intuition. You minimized your trauma to make others comfortable. You softened your voice so they wouldn't call you angry. But chosen one, can I tell you something? That wasn't weakness. That was restraint. That was self-control in the face of madness. You were the one holding the room together when they were tearing you apart. They told people you were bitter, yet it's them who can't stop talking about you. They said you were unstable, yet it's them who stalk your peace. They claimed you were obsessed, yet it's them who refresh your page like it's a lifeline. That's not irony, that's exposure. Psalm 34:18 reminds us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." You weren't crazy, you were crushed, and God didn't abandon you in that state. He drew closer. He watched how you kept choosing love in a room full of betrayal. He saw the dignity with which you walked away instead of fighting dirty. And now, that same grace is turning the tide. Think about Keanu Reeves, mocked for being weird, labeled an outsider in Hollywood, misunderstood for his stillness and silence, but now, revered for his authenticity, resilience, and depth. He didn't change for the world had to catch up to him. And chosen one, that's your story too. They kept waiting for you to crack, didn't they? Waiting for you to fold so they could say, "See, I told you they were unstable." But instead you healed, quietly, deeply, and now your growth has become their undoing. Because what do liars do when their story is no longer supported by your participation? They collapse. Ecclesiastes 10:12 says, "Words from the mouth of the wise are gracious, but fools are consumed by their own lips." They tried to consume your truth with lies, but now those lies are devouring their peace. And here's the final truth they cannot face. You've moved on, not just physically, but energetically. You've disconnected from the narrative, the trauma, the identity they projected onto you. You stopped needing closure because you realized closure isn't something they can give. It's something you choose. And now your silence is the loudest truth they've ever heard. So let them toss, let them scroll, let them obsess, let them replay conversations you've long forgotten. That's not your burden anymore. You gave them chances. You extended grace. But now your job is to move forward, not to wait for their awakening. And don't you dare shrink just to keep their ego comfortable. Don't you dare doubt your clarity just because they labeled it crazy. Their labels say more about their fear than your truth. You were never the villain. You were the revelation. You weren't unstable. You were uncontrollable. And that's what scared them most. They couldn't own you. They couldn't define you. They couldn't mute you. So they tried to destroy your image. But chosen one, look at you now, still rising, still healing, still glowing. And now, their sleepless nights aren't filled with guilt. They're filled with awareness. They see it, they feel it, they know. And that knowing haunts them. You were never crazy. You were just ahead of your time. Number 4, stop doubting your power. Even your enemies saw it before you did. Chosen one, let's stop dancing around the truth. Let's stop minimizing what's been screaming in your spirit for years. You are powerful beyond what you've dared to believe. But you doubted it, didn't you? You looked at the chaos, the setbacks, the betrayals, and asked, why me? You took hit after hit and thought maybe you were cursed. You questioned your worth every time a door slammed in your face or someone close to you suddenly changed. You internalized the pain and whispered to yourself, what did I do to deserve this? But what if the storm wasn't an attack? What if it was an activation? What if every setback was actually a sacred sharpening? What if every betrayal wasn't punishment, but preparation? Let that sit. While you were curled up in silence, wondering if you had any value left, your enemies were wide awake at 2 a.m., tormented by your potential. While you were convincing yourself you were too broken to keep going, they were watching from the shadows, fearing what would happen if you ever figured out the truth. And now that you're waking up to who you really are, they're scrambling. Because the one thing they feared the most, you stepping into your own power, is finally happening. You ever wonder why they hit you so hard? Why the attacks were personal, consistent, even strategic? Do you think it was random? Number, it was calculated. They sensed something about you, something sacred, something they couldn't put into words, but it threatened the false reality they were trying to protect. They didn't just envy your light, they feared it. Isaiah 54:17 reminds us, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. You were built with divine durability, but when you forgot your power, they took advantage of your silence. They tried to confuse you, because a confused person isn't dangerous, but a chosen one who's clear, that's a threat to the entire system. And here's what stings them now. You're getting clear. You're realizing that the same force that carried you through depression, abandonment, abuse, and spiritual drought, that's not weakness. That's evidence of something divine. The world tried to shame your scars, but those scars are survival tattoos. Proof that not only did you walk through hell, you didn't let the flames define you. Look at Maya Angelou. She was mute for 5 years after being sexually abused as a child. People assumed her silence was weakness, but in that silence, her spirit was being formed. Her voice later became one of the most powerful in history. That's your story too. You thought your quiet moments were voids. They were actually vaults, where your purpose was being protected. So why did you keep brushing off your own strength? Why did you keep telling yourself it's not that deep when you knew it was a spiritual rebirth? Why did you minimize your transformation just because others didn't celebrate it? You saw no applause and thought you were off course, but anointing doesn't need an audience. Romans 8:18 says, the pain that you've been feeling can't compare to the joy that's coming. And yet you kept shrinking, kept doubting, kept looking for proof that you mattered, when the very fact you were still breathing was proof that you are marked. and they saw it long before you did. That's why they attacked. Because people don't try to destroy what isn't a threat. Your elevation exposed their stagnation. Your glow made their shadows obvious. You didn't even need to speak. Your presence unsettled them. Ever wonder why they copied your words but mocked your voice? Why they studied your energy in silence but never supported your growth in public? Because they admired what they couldn't become. And when admiration turns to envy, destruction follows. But they couldn't destroy you. They couldn't even delay you. They only delayed themselves by thinking your power came from them. John 15:18 tells us, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first." You weren't hated because you did something wrong. You were hated because you're evidence that healing is possible, that transformation is real, that light can live even after trauma. You make people uncomfortable because your truth breaks their illusion. Just ask Tyler Perry. Homeless, abused, laughed at, rejected. But he believed in a voice only he could hear. He built an empire from scratch, in spite of being doubted by almost everyone. Like him, you carry a blueprint that others can't understand because it was never given to them. It was assigned to you. So stop playing small, stop offering access to the old version of you just to keep the peace. That version died in the fire, and what came out was forged, not fragile. You've outgrown their opinion. You've outgrown the lies. You've outgrown the environments that required you to shrink to survive. It's time to stop asking for permission to rise. You say it's easier to stay small, right? Easier to avoid the spotlight. Easier to dodge the criticism. But let's be honest, the silence didn't protect you. It nearly suffocated you. You stopped talking about your purpose, but the ache didn't go away. You stopped showing your strength, but the pressure just built up. Hiding didn't help. It just delayed the inevitable. Esther 4:14 says, "Perhaps you were born for such a time as this." So why do you keep acting like you're accidental? Why are you walking through this life like you weren't handpicked by heaven for something massive? You weren't just chosen to survive. You were chosen to rebuild the very systems that once tried to erase you. And now that you're rising, they don't know what to do. The same people who laughed when you cried are suddenly silent. The ones who swore you'd never make it now flinch every time your name is mentioned. Why? Because the light they tried to kill is glowing louder than ever, and they can't stop it. They can't rewrite it. They can't outrun it. Think about Chadwick Boseman, quiet, humble, mysterious, but powerful beyond measure. The world didn't even know he was battling cancer while filming roles that inspired generations. That kind of silent strength? That's what you have. Unshakable, grounded, immortal in impact. So no more doubting your worth. No more editing your soul to be digestible. No more pretending to be confused about your assignment you've always known. And now it's time to own it, because your enemies saw it. The attacks weren't confirmation of your failure, they were confirmation of your force. They feared you would realize it. And now that you have, they can't compete, they can't keep up, they can't erase the spiritual echo of your truth. Let me ask you directly, why not you? Why not be the one who breaks the cycle, who heals the bloodline, who builds the vision that others only dream of? Why not walk into rooms that were built to exclude you and shift the energy simply by being there? That's not arrogance, that's assignment. You want proof you're chosen. Look at what tried to break you and failed. Look at the lies they told and how none of them stuck. Look at the darkness you walked through and how you still carry light. That's not coincidence, that's covenant. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed." You were never meant to stay down. You were designed to rise, and your enemies knew it. That's why they panicked the moment you stopped explaining and started evolving. So from this moment forward, let this truth settle in your bones. They saw your power before you did. And now that you've claimed it, you are unstoppable. Don't whisper your legacy. Walk in it. Number 5. They didn't break you. They built your legend. Chosen one, let's tell the truth out loud. You didn't just survive the battle, they accidentally made you immortal. Every lie they told, every fake apology they gave, every carefully crafted moment designed to sabotage your peace didn't destroy you. It sculpted you. It wasn't your breakdown. It was your becoming. What they intended to be, your fall, ended up forging your rise. Isn't it wild how the very hands that tried to tear you apart only ended up chiseling the masterpiece that is your legacy? They thought they were cracking your confidence, poking holes in your destiny, but instead they became unwilling participants in your elevation. Let me ask you, have you realized yet that every one of their schemes was secretly building your platform? Let's get one thing straight. They didn't break you. They built your legend. Every insult, it carved another line of wisdom on your spirit. Every betrayal, it tightened your discernment and deepened your resolve. Every delay, it positioned you more perfectly for divine timing. And every moment of silence, it wasn't absence, it was alignment. They didn't know it, but they were participating in prophecy. Romans 8:28 reminds us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That means nothing was wasted, not the lies, not the tears, not the losses. All of it was woven into the rise they swore would never happen. But let's be real, there was a time when you didn't see it that way, right? You tried to shrink. You thought if you stayed quiet, they'd stop coming for you. You believed that being kind, forgiving, and endlessly patient would protect you from the darts being thrown in the dark. You prayed that if you didn't clap back, maybe they'd see your good heart. But instead, they mistook your kindness for weakness, your stillness for silence, your grace for gullibility. And when you finally snapped, when you stopped showing up for fake friends, when you cut off access, when you guarded your peace like treasure, what did they do? They tried to rewrite your story. They labeled you the villain, because people who can't control your soul will always try to contaminate your name. But chosen one, do you realize now that when they tried to define you, it only made your true identity louder? Look at Nelson Mandela. They labeled him a radical, a threat, a criminal. They locked him up for 27 years, hoping to silence him forever. But they didn't realize every day in that cell was building a story, a legacy, a movement. He emerged not just free, but historic. That's what you're doing now. You're stepping out of the tomb they put you in, and they don't know how to handle your resurrection. Every season of loneliness you endured wasn't isolation, it was consecration. God was setting you apart for something their manipulation couldn't touch. And now, as you walk forward, they are forced to watch in horror as you rise from the fire they lit. Isaiah 61:3 says, "To all who mourn, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair." You are living proof of this promise. You're not just healed, you're anointed. You're not just surviving, you're glowing. They thought they were writing your obituary. But what they didn't know is that pain is the ink legends are written in. They thought they were watching your downfall, but they were accidentally filming your origin story. Chosen one. The universe didn't let you go through fire to leave you in smoke. You were being forged by betrayal, by disappointment, by heartbreak, and by silence. Why do you think it had to be so intense, so personal, so isolating? Because greatness isn't born in applause, it's born in adversity. You were never meant to live average. You were built to be a blueprint. Let's look at Malala Yousafzai, a girl who was shot in the head for daring to want an education. They thought they could silence her with violence. But that moment became the genesis of a global movement. From wounded teenager to Nobel Peace Prize laureate. That's the level of reversal God can orchestrate. And if he did it for her, why wouldn't he do it for you? So stop wishing it had gone differently. Stop mourning the way people exited your life. If it hadn't happened exactly like that, you'd still be sitting at tables where you were the meal. You'd still be handing loyalty to people who only saw you as leverage. You'd still be explaining your soul to those who were committed to misunderstanding it. But instead, betrayal became your blessing. The heartbreak cracked you open. The loss rerouted your compass. And the silence became your sanctuary. Psalm 118 verse 22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." That's you, the one they overlooked, the one they tried to bury, the one they dismissed too soon. And now they're watching in disbelief as your name is echoed in rooms they never imagined you'd enter. They don't hate you because you won. They hate that they were part of why you had to fight so hard. They hate that you turned their cruelty into curriculum, that you took their rejection and built a stage out of it. And now that you're shining, they know the truth. The fire didn't burn you, it branded you. Let's bring it to the real world again. Think of Howard Schultz, the man behind Starbucks, grew up in housing projects, rejected by over 200 investors. People laughed at his idea of selling expensive coffee. But he believed. He kept building. Today, he's a billionaire. And every person who doubted him, they became footnotes in his legend, just like those who came for you. So, why are you still apologizing for your glow? Why are you still feeling guilty for walking away from people who handed you pain and expected you to carry it like a gift? Why are you still mourning what God used to elevate you? You didn't just survive. You transformed. You evolved. You alchemized pain into power. You built a legend out of scraps and betrayal. John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That's why they're mad, because your light didn't just survive their darkness, it exposed it. So from this day forward, walk like you carry legacy, move like you're on assignment, speak like your voice holds healing, and never again feel guilty for becoming everything they swore you'd never be. You are the survivor, the testimony, the proof that heaven never forgets who it placed its hand on. You're the receipt that grace is stronger than gossip, that favor is louder than failure. And let's be even clearer, they didn't just fail to break you. They became part of the very story that's now inspiring others. Their cruelty gave you character, their lies gave you language, their rejection gave you reach. You didn't just bounce back. You arrived. You are not in a comeback story. You're in your coronation season. So, chosen one, never again minimize your transformation to make your enemies feel comfortable. Never again try to make your greatness digestible for people who only saw your worth when it served them. Never again apologize for being the miracle that rose from their mess. They didn't break you, they built your legend, and now they have to live in the shadow of the very force they tried to destroy. Number 6. This karma isn't coincidence, it's customized. Chosen one, let's not play polite about what's unfolding, what's happening in their life right now. It isn't bad luck, it's not a streak of misfortune, and it's definitely not just one of those seasons. No, what you're witnessing is karma, and it's not random. It's precision crafted. This isn't coincidence. It's custom-made correction, tailored by the universe with their exact frequency stitched into every thread. The collapse you're watching. It has their name monogrammed on every single consequence. Have you ever wondered why their downfall is so specific? Why every area they once gloated about is now suddenly glitching? Why their plans stall, their relationships crumble, and their reputation begins to crack under pressure? It's not because the stars misaligned. It's because they aligned exactly as intended. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Galatians 6:7 tells us, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." And, oh, they sowed. They sowed seeds of envy in dark rooms. They watered deception with whispers. They fertilized their ego with manipulation, thinking they'd never harvest what they planted. But you, chosen one, you didn't need to retaliate. You didn't need to curse them. The soil they played in is now yielding results, and none of it looks like what they expected. Now they're scrambling, blaming timing, calling it burnout, pretending their losses are part of the journey. But you know better, don't you? You feel it in your spirit. You sense the crack in their energy, the weight in their aura. You can feel the echo of justice, not because you wished for it, but because it was always inevitable. Let's ask something real. Why did they come for you in the first place? Why was your name on their tongue so often? Why did they plot delays, sabotage opportunities, whisper lies in rooms you hadn't even entered yet? Was it really about who you were, or who you were becoming? Because that's what they feared. They feared the rise, they feared your clarity, they feared your alignment. So they tried to hijack your timeline with distraction, and when karma didn't respond immediately, they got bold, arrogant, louder. But the universe is never rushed. It's precise. And now, the timing has matured, the mirror has cracked wide open, and every lie they projected onto you is bouncing back with brutal accuracy. Psalm 94:23 says, "He will repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them." Destruction here doesn't always mean death. It means dismantling. And that's what's happening now. The illusion they built is unraveling thread by thread. The roles they played no longer fit. The masks are slipping in public places. The people they convinced are watching closely, and they're not blind anymore. Look at Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as the next Steve Jobs, who built an empire on exaggerated promises and false science. She controlled the narrative until the truth finally arrived. And when it did, it wasn't loud. It was methodical, just like karma. It arrived wearing calm, wearing truth, and exposed everything piece by piece. And now, like her, those who once slandered you are facing a spotlight they never saw coming. You remember what they said about you, don't you? That you were too much, that you were unstable, that you were bitter, hard to deal with, dramatic. But now, look again. Who's the one falling apart? Who's fighting invisible fires in every direction? Who's surrounded by tension, exposed by their own contradictions? Proverbs 26:27 speaks to this clearly. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. That pit they dug wasn't just for you, it became their blueprint. They built the cage they're now trapped in. And the worst part? They can't figure out how to get out because the trap was designed based on the lies they believed about you. And let's talk about the timing. I know, you wanted justice sooner. You wanted vindication when the betrayal was still fresh, when the sting still burned. You begged God, when will they be exposed? When will they feel what I felt? But heaven wasn't ignoring you. It was calibrating. You weren't just being vindicated, you were being elevated, and the timing of their collapse had to match the visibility of your rise. Think about Joseph from Genesis, betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. But when the karma of life swung back, it wasn't petty, it was prophetic. He rose to power while those who once sold him came begging for help. And he didn't lift a finger in revenge, he just kept rising. That's you now. You didn't expose them, you didn't drag them, you didn't announce their darkness, you just kept glowing. And your silence, that's what's haunting them now, because they're unraveling while you haven't even looked back. You didn't touch them, you simply left. You didn't curse them, you simply evolved. You didn't retaliate, you reclaimed your energy. And now they're left spiraling, confused as to why everything feels heavy, jammed, delayed, why their peace feels fake, why their plans no longer flow. It's not guilt, it's energetic exposure. Just like Lance Armstrong, once a global hero in cycling, praised for his strength and comeback story. But behind the scenes, a web of deception, and when truth showed up, it didn't whisper. It dismantled everything. That's what happens when energy catches up. And Chosen One, the energy is catching up right now. Still wondering if it's really karma? Look again. The same person who tried to block your blessings, blocked now by their own stagnation. The one who mocked your healing, drowning in their own unhealed wounds. The one who delayed your timeline, stuck in an endless loop of their own self-created chaos. This isn't about cruelty, it's about correction. This isn't about vengeance, it's about justice. Karma isn't just about payback, it's about precision. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just rearranges everything they called secure. Let's be honest, have you ever seen someone post fake peace online while fighting for air in real life? You can sense it. Their aura is tight, their frequency is off, and that's not projection, that's discernment. Because when someone once held access to a soul like yours and mishandled it, their collapse isn't accidental, it's mathematical. James 3:16 reminds us, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Their life is glitching not because of your curse, but because of their ambition, their jealousy, their choices. And now the disorder is unmasking them. And maybe you're still asking, should I reach out? Should I clarify? No, Chosen One. Your absence is your answer. Your distance is your declaration. You don't need to explain what their own chaos is revealing. You don't need to scream when the storm is already announcing the truth. Just like Monica Lewinsky, who spent years being publicly shamed while others played innocent. But time revealed truth. Silence turned into wisdom, and karma arrived in the form of restored dignity. That's your story too. You're not just watching destruction, you're watching divine correction. So what should you do now? Should you watch and gloat? Watch and rise. Stay focused, stay grounded. Keep moving in your purpose. Because the point isn't to celebrate their fall, it's to recognize that justice is no longer delayed. Psalm 37:7-9 says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land." That's what you're walking into now. Inheritance, peace, fulfillment. And they're walking into the exact weight they once placed on your shoulders. This karma isn't coincidence, it's customized. So let them call it bad luck, but you'll call it what it really is: spiritual alignment returning home. 7, they're not fighting you anymore. They're fighting their reflection. Chosen One, you need to hear this clearly. It was never really about you. It looked like it. It felt like it. But the truth, they were never fighting you. They were fighting what you made them see. They didn't hate you. They hated the parts of themselves they could no longer deny in your presence. Because you weren't just a person in their life. You were a mirror. A divine mirror sent not to punish them, but to reveal them. And they weren't ready. Have you ever noticed how deeply people react when your growth exposes their stagnation? How quickly they flip when your boundaries shine a spotlight on their manipulation? It wasn't your energy they feared. It was what your energy made them feel. You weren't chaotic. You were convicting. Your silence wasn't passive aggression. It was sacred distance. You never declared war, but your truth declared reflection. And that's what they couldn't handle. John 3:20 reminds us, Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. You carried light. You didn't try to expose them. You simply existed. And that was enough to shatter their illusion, because your existence forced them to confront what they'd buried. They twisted your strength into arrogance. They labeled your boundaries as bitterness. They disguised your elevation as ego. But what they couldn't admit, what they still can't say out loud, is that you didn't hurt them. You unmasked them. Think of Princess Diana. Her grace, poise, and authenticity disrupted a carefully crafted system. She was seen as a threat, not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. She reflected back what others were trying to hide, and the system couldn't handle it, just like the people who came against you. You didn't have to expose their lies. Your peace did. You didn't retaliate. You removed yourself, and in doing so, you took away their scapegoat. So now what's left? Let's talk about the silence. The deafening, brutal silence that came after you walked away. It's not empty. It's echoing. It's filled with their own voice now, with questions they can't escape. Was it really them? Or was it me? Why can't I stop thinking about someone I claim not to care about? Why do I still feel angry if I've moved on? These aren't your burdens to carry. These are the consequences of self-deception meeting clarity. Romans 2:1 says, "You, therefore, have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself." They judged you harshly, publicly, often. But now, their own inner world is flipping on them, not because you fought back, but because your absence pulled the mask off everything they tried to hide. Let me ask you something real. How long did you stay silent, hoping they'd figure it out? How many times did you swallow pain to keep the peace? How many nights did you cry privately while they paraded publicly? You held your tongue, not because you were weak, but because you were wise. You knew that energy speaks louder than proof. You trusted that time would reveal what your words couldn't. And now, that time has come. They're not fighting you anymore. They're fighting their reflection. They can't lie to themselves the way they used to. Their inner world is loud now. There's no more escape in distraction, no more comfort in blame. The same narrative they used to control others is slipping through their fingers. Because your life is still moving, glowing, elevating, and theirs is stuck in the same cycle they tried to trap you in. Just like Jean-Michel Basquiat, an artist mocked and dismissed early on, accused of being erratic and out of control. But in truth, he was just too visionary, too raw, too honest. The world wasn't ready for his frequency, and those who couldn't keep up tried to tear him down. Yet today, his work speaks for itself. He didn't have to defend his legacy. His truth defended itself, just like yours will. They smeared your name thinking it would silence your truth. But all it did was make people curious. And the more they watched, the more they saw the inconsistencies. Now, those who once believed the lie are starting to step back. Not because you explained yourself, but because your growth made the lie impossible to sustain. Have you noticed the way they watch you now, from a distance, quietly, consumed by your glow, but unable to re-enter your life? That's not coincidence. That's what it looks like when someone is trapped by their own reflection. The guilt they never addressed is now the echo they can't escape. Every success you experience is a reminder of their deception. Every peace you carry is a confrontation to their internal chaos. Proverbs 10:9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." You walked away, and that walk is now shouting louder than their gossip ever did. Because while they're still trying to maintain a version of you that no longer exists, you're building a reality they can't distort. Let's get even deeper. Why did they build entire alliances against you? Why did they work overtime to convince others of your flaws? Because unity in delusion feels like validation. They couldn't face their own shadows, So they created a false enemy, you. But when you became unavailable, when you no longer played along, the group dynamic collapsed, because it was never about truth. It was about distraction. You were never the war. Their wounds were. Think of Whitney Houston, called difficult, troubled, unstable. But what the world failed to see for too long was the internal pain, the pressure, the projection. The narrative was twisted, but even in her silence, even in her brokenness, her voice, her essence couldn't be erased. You're the same. Even if they tried to bury your light under accusations, your essence outlived their storyline. And now they're haunted, not by you, but by what you forced them to see. You showed them the shallowness of their validation. You exposed the foundation of their false peace. You reminded them that control isn't confidence, that approval isn't love. And now, without your energy to stabilize their delusion, their world is caving in. 2 Corinthians 13:5 urges, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. That's what's happening now. The testing, the reckoning, the mirror is in full view, and for the first time in their life, they can't look away. Chosen one, I know you stayed quiet longer than you should have. I know you held back when you could have destroyed them with facts. But that wasn't weakness. That was spiritual restraint. That was divine discipline. And now that your silence has done its work, the truth is screaming louder than any accusation ever could. So don't question if they're okay. They're not. Don't ask if they regret it. They do. But more importantly, they're just now realizing they never hated you. They hated how you made them feel. Seen, uncomfortable, exposed. You reminded them of what they refused to become. You mirrored back the work they avoided, the healing they postponed, the character they never developed. You were the mirror, not the enemy. And now that mirror is chasing them through every room. Every fake smile, every failed relationship, every sleepless night. This isn't spiritual warfare, it's spiritual reflection. And they're finally meeting themselves. Chosen one, don't let guilt knock on your door for what they're now facing. That weight, it doesn't belong to you. What's happening in their life isn't your punishment. It's not your karma. It's not your responsibility to rescue them from a reality they built with their own hands. You didn't curse them. You didn't manipulate the outcome. You simply walked away with integrity, and the silence you left behind became the loudest mirror they've ever had to face. You were the lesson they refused to learn. You were the warning they mocked. You were the clarity they called confusion. And now the universe is making sure they understand what they avoided when you were in their presence. They're not fighting you anymore. That chapter is closed. What they're battling now is far more personal. It's their own reflection, their own habits, their own consequences. They're not haunted by what you did. They're haunted by what you revealed. You didn't destroy them. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate. All you did was leave, focus, and heal. But that was enough, because once you removed your light, their shadows could no longer hide. The silence they once laughed at is now the loudest thing in their life. And here's what hits the hardest. The only person they can't lie to anymore is themselves. So chosen one, release the burden of wondering how they're doing. Don't feel pulled to check in or reopen wounds that God already closed. You didn't wish this on them, they manifested it. You didn't create the chaos, they attracted it. You were a mirror, not a monster. Let them deal with what they chose. And you keep walking forward. You keep building, healing, becoming. You already won the moment you stopped playing small to make them feel big. As we close this message, I want you to anchor this truth in your spirit. You didn't just survive the damage. They handed you the material for your destiny. They thought their lies would bury you, But those lies became the roots of your reinvention. They thought their betrayal would break you, but it built your breakthrough. They thought they wrote your ending, but they unknowingly lit the first page of your legacy. If this message spoke to your soul, I invite you to share it with another chosen one. Because every time the truth is shared, it frees someone else from shame, confusion, or silence. And if you feel led to give back through the Super Thanks feature, I want to say this clearly: your donation means the world. But even if you don't give, your presence here, your time, your spirit, are already a blessing. I am deeply thankful for every view, every silent listener, every heart that resonates with these words. Now, let me leave you with this blessing. I speak peace over your next steps. I speak clarity over your mind. I speak strength into every place that once felt broken. May your glow increase. May your boundaries remain firm. And may every lie spoken against you unravel while your truth continues to rise like the morning sun. You are not behind. You are right on divine schedule. They tried to turn your silence into weakness, but that silence, it became sacred, it became strategy, and now it has become justice. You are not finished. You are only getting started. Let's keep rising together.